You're welcome back. I'm unable to play you the interviews that we had with some Ghanaians and the fears and pains that they shared with us. I'm unable to play that to you now. Maybe in the course of the show, we should be able to bring that to you so that you can get some closer picture of how the situation is in South Africa for migrants who are there, African migrants, unfortunately. You're welcome. My guests are Abdul Malik Kweku Bako. He's editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Kofi Adams, who is the national organizer of the governing National Democratic Congress and spokesperson for former President John Rawlings, will also join us. He's not here yet. Mike Okwe Jr., he's a lawyer and deputy communications director of the opposition New Patriotic Party. He is here. Dr. Josiah Aye, he's chairman of the National Democratic Party. He is also not in yet. They will join us. But gentlemen, Kweku and Mike, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Very good morning. Very good morning.
Good, good, good. Well, I think we'll just straight away start to pick your thoughts on what is happening in South Africa. Just a while ago, I played what Julius Malema had to say, and obviously very disturbed. And we're told of people who are boycotting South African flights, you know, airways, and a whole lot of things, boycotting even products that are coming, that are known to originate from that country. Kweku, start with you. What do you have to say? And particularly, what the response of our sub-regional body, ECOWAS, AU, and also our own government?
Well. It's really a very unfortunate development. I'm really particularly sad because this whole thing is emanating from South Africa, of all places. I am told that this is not the very first time.
Yes, it's not.
It's happened about twice or so.
Right.
Add this to it, it creates a certain pattern. And so it only reinforces my sadness. This is within the context that this is a country that virtually became a symbol in terms of our anti-colonial, anti-imperial, anti-foreign domination struggle. And as a young man, I had, through the accident of history in terms of political connections, had a very close association with some of them who were in exile, some of their leaders,
right.
Not just South Africa, but the whole Southern African region. And as we grew up too, some of them were students at the African Students Hostel, the international students hostel near the airport, and some were in Ghanaian schools, training here. So there was a certain relationship that one developed, and I'm sure I'm not the only Ghanaian who had that situation. So they became like brothers and sisters. I always dreamt of visiting South Africa. So the first time I had the opportunity to go there, I thought I had arrived. I'd been liberated. I love those people. You know, we fought for them. We sacrificed our national and natural resources to help them liberate themselves from the yoke of apartheid. I've had to do this thing because that is what drives my emotions today. So it is very sad. Thankfully, at this particular moment, it doesn't appear as if too many casualties in terms of fatalities and injuries have occurred. I'm told other African nationals have suffered more than we have.
Yes.
But
especially the last one.
Yes.
It was really terrible.
Yes. But I'm not going to restrict myself to just the Ghanaian thing. I'm an African. I'm a Pan-Africanist as well. And this is such a disappointment. I hope the South African political leadership and economic business leadership will sit up and make sure that it doesn't reoccur by doing certain things right within the context of their economy and polity. You see, Ghanaians, this is not the first time those times, you recall, I've been going through some little material here before I make my substantive submission. If you go into the Hansard of March 20th, 1981, then Majority Leader, Mr. C.C. Fiti, moved a motion in Parliament that this House, I'm quoting, deploying the inhuman and brutal treatment which resulted in the death by suffocation of 46 Ghanaian nationals in La Côte d'Ivoire. This is 1981, March. You check Daily Graphic, November 3rd, 1993, headline, Ivorians attack Ghanaians, 50 killed, 100 injured. This was retaliatory action they took because some of their fans who came to watch a match here, I think Kotoko and Asek or so, were beaten by some of our own people. And they retaliated in an extreme manner. And 50 Ghanaians were killed, 100 injured. Not too long ago, we know that in Gambia, some Ghanaians, the number is now a bit of a mystery. We began by saying there were 44, but the final report talks about 8 Ghanaians. But whatever it is, there were Ghanaians. Even one Ghanaian losing his life or getting injured because of xenophobic or suspicious activities is not something we can countenance. So you see, this trend has been there for a while. And it sometimes makes nonsense of the Pan-African project. And you ask yourself, how do we reconcile the spirit behind the movement that our founding fathers on the continent, you know, pursued to the extent of creating the OAU and now the AU, and with all the instruments that are part and parcel of the African project, Pan-African project. So it's very sad. We should just be cautious. Our government, together with the ECOWAS, has issued a statement. I've seen the statement.
Right.
I think it's a welcome statement. At this stage, that's all they can do. I'm told our mission in South Africa is on the alert, interacting with Ghanaian residents in terms of their associations and their leadership, so that in case of any eventuality, if there is a need for evacuation, we may be able to do it. We know we've done evacuations before in Libya and elsewhere.
Right.
So we have a certain history and experience that may guide us.
In the statement that was issued by ECOWAS condemning the attacks, they made a specific request that, quote, we welcome the statement of our brother President Jacob Zuma and his assurances of a peaceful resolution, but we request for an urgent national action plan backed by a behavioral change campaign against xenophobia in South Africa.
Yeah, first and foremost, there's a need for a police action plan out there, security, I mean. The security forces out there must be out there to ensure that they stop any attacks and then offer protection and security to the African migrants or nationals who are non-South Africans.
What's actually happening is that those who fear being attacked are running to the police stations.
Then I'm told they are being put in some tents, like displaced, internally displaced persons. All these things are not good enough. As Mr. Hoy said yesterday on a telephone interview, it's even getting to the winter climate.
Right.
So in terms of public, their health, we cannot guarantee.
Okay.
But the first and foremost is security measures, containment of the threat. Those who are moving into the, if indeed they protect them where they live, it may not be necessary for them to rush to the police station or to be put in tents. South Africa has the capability in terms of security. They have the capability to proceed on a containment policy, which is just the first step. Then this point about national program and behavioral rearrangement, all those are good. But you see, bottom line really is economics, this whole thing. See, even look here, and let me just give an analogy. It may not be absolute, but it has a certain linkage. You see the invasion of Chinese and other nationals in our retail business.
Right.
You know there's a certain revulsion, there's a certain reaction to that. Yes. Aliens Compliance Order, which was poorly executed with a lot of human rights consequences, was underlined also by an attempt to Ghanaianize or nationalize that retail business.
Right.
That was the philosophy. That was poorly thought out and executed. That came with a lot of human rights trauma, you know. So in every country, depending on the economic arrangements and the kind of political leadership that comes to bear on it, if you don't handle those things well, they can get out of hand. Then you can have all sorts of characters taking the law into their hands.
And the relation to trade, you had that king who is blamed for sparking all of this, actually making that analogy using trade. That if you go through, you see shops where people are hanging a whole lot of stuff that are not South African.
Yes.
And he sought to say that was an attack on their culture. And that's what is led to all of this.
It's begun on that level there, but it's even in the middle class as well.
Okay.
You see, the black empowerment program they launched has failed. It's only built a black elite, very small elite who have become businessmen and are also amassing wealth and keeping it to themselves.
Right.
It's not spreading. That's a fact. You understand? Then don't forget, many of them were not educated. They were not given the kind of education that would enable them. Take all colonial colonies had that experience. So you have to start a certain process of Africanization, progressive program to try and educate and empower technically, professionally, and economically some of your citizens so that they can also take part. In South Africa, it began, let me just conclude, it began with this thing about, you know, they didn't have education. Now, since some African, independent African countries helped to educate some of their people. When they became independent, they've also educated a lot of their people. It's now moved from education to the question of experience. Oh, you have the education, you may have the paper qualification, but you don't have the exposure and experience to manage these entities. So more and more non-South Africans are going in there to take those positions because apart from the fact that they have the professional qualifications, they also have the professional experience. It's a really dicey situation, but it's not peculiar to South Africa. And the solution is not going out there to attack. Xenophobia is not the prescription for that economic dilemma being confronting the masses of South Africa.
Thank you very much, Kweku. And I'd like us to hear Jacob Zuma himself, what he had to say. And then we'll come back home. Nana Akufo-Addo calls it sickening and despicable. But beyond that, what exactly can be done to rescue the situation? Well, you just heard Jacob Zuma, president of South Africa, who Julius Malema thinks is not very sincere about what he's talking about because his own son, he's unable to put him in check, keep him in check. And he's running amok in town and getting into trouble all over and even preaching, you know, preaching in the opposite direction, among other things. He had expected also that the president will directly warn that chief who is, you know, blamed for the eruption of the current situation. Now, Mike, I was saying that your presidential candidate, Nana Akufo-Addo, has labeled this as sickening and barbaric. But what can we do beyond that? We've heard people like Egbert Fabel suggest that those who have been victims should be considering to suing the South African government because this is against the grain of the African Charter, which says that the individual's life shall be inviolable, and this is what is going on.
Well, let me start by saying a very good morning to all your viewers, to my fellow panelists, and to your good self.
Sorry, let me introduce Kofi Adams. Kofi Adams is the national organizer of the NDC. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah. No apologies. Or you can give him the time to apologize for being late. Come on. Ask Kofi any time to tease him a bit is very welcome. So anyway, moving on to the main matter at hand. This South African issue, I don't know if I'm not one of the only ones who's not surprised or shocked. Because a few things have happened in my various visits to South Africa, which, for me, this event was not surprising. The first one was I was in South Africa at the time. I was in South Africa at the time Mandela passed, and at the time Mandela was buried. And one strange thing I noticed was that when Jacob Zuma came into the stadium, he was booed terribly. Boo, boo. Oh, so I was wondering that what is the antecedent for this kind of reaction? You know, where you could see that there was frustration in the system. And then I was told that the people don't think that Jacob Zuma is doing a good job. The people are getting economically frustrated. And you see, frustration, as Kweku just mentioned, is one thing that leads a lot of people to attack others. Because, you know, most bad workmen, they quarrel their tools. So if you look at even at the UK at the moment, the biggest group of people who are being attacked are the Eastern Europeans. Because the locals feel that they are supposed to be getting certain jobs that the people are taking away from them. And because of that, they've become very defensive, angry, and go ahead to propagate all these various attacks. Before I come to the obvious areas like the statements by Hannah Tete, the statements by Nana Akufo-Addo, statements by Jacob Zuma, and the various other people, the second underlying problem in South Africa at the moment is that the economy is getting so bad. There are two things which are becoming, I would say, akin to the Ghanaian situation that we have at the moment. The first one is doomsday. South Africa has never experienced light off. They are a country where the electricity has been very efficient. But I'm sure, as you know, with all these recent ESCOM problems, that now South Africa has started experiencing doomsday. And the doomsday has therefore started affecting the economy very badly. Now look at the second angle too. When it comes to exchange rates, you know, Ghana, in terms of last year, apart from maybe Djibouti and maybe Somalia, we had the worst exchange rate decline in the whole of Africa. I think yes, and then Sudan. Very bad performance. And one currency that also lost a lot of juice was the rand. Now, this has led to a certain pot of frustration, of anger, and therefore, as you can see, unwarranted and justified violence. It's unjustified. It's condemnable. It's unacceptable. But when you are looking at that kind of environment building up, you see that people start taking out their frustration on the government officials first, as you can see the booing and so on and so forth.
The South African embassy has issued a statement, and it says that claims of economic difficulties and using that to say there are no jobs for indigenes, and the reason being that that's why they want to drive away migrants so that they can take over the jobs that are there, is not permissible. And those claims are also not even true in the first place.
Okay. Now I'll deal with the two. First of all, permissible and not true. I will say that it is not permissible. It is unjustifiable. And as I went on to say, condemnable and unwarranted. There's no excuse for you to say that because I don't have a job, That's why I went to Kofi Adams' house and became an armed robber and shot him. It's unacceptable. But the truth of the matter is that there's a certain situation in South Africa where the government is not performing, and they cannot tell us that they are performing with the Doomsaw and the Rand alone. I gave you 2 examples. In fact, Jacob Zuma, as I said, is so unpopular.
I don't know how widespread the Doomsaw, you call it Doomsaw, is.
Yeah.
I understand that there's a bit of it in some portions.
You can call it a bit, you can call it a little.
And not,
well, but
that's right.
However, yes. You see, everything is relative. Because when you are not used to it at all, whether it is small sugar, it is still sugar. It's like a diabetic patient. You say, well, I only put 2 spoons of sugar. But because of his peculiar circumstance, 2 spoons of sugar is a lot of sugar. But to a normal person, he will drink 3 spoons of sugar and it's not a big deal.
Yes, I asked the question also.
Oh, no, I'm just making the point. Yes.
Because I want us to really move on this.
Yeah.
I asked the question that Egbert Fable refers to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and he refers to Article 4 of that charter, which says, and I read, quote, human beings are inviolable. Every human being shall be entitled to respect for his life and the integrity of his person. No one may be arbitrarily deprived of his right. Now he's saying on the basis of this, those who are suffering these massacres, these unjustifiable assaults, should consider suing and getting compensated for them.
Very good question. I'll just make a little point before I get onto that. My point is simple that, you see, when certain situations exist and certain things are aggravated, we must look at the whole problem too holistically. We shouldn't try and pretend to be ostriches. Because as for this, as I said, I'll go to what Hannah Tete has said, Nanado has said, what Egbert Fable has said. All these things show that we don't accept it. But look at the recent, let me give you an example. Look at the recent pure water, what should I say, baptism or hitting of our ministers who went to do Campus Connect. When they shout Campus Connect, then the people shout, Yeji Alawa, we are collecting allowance. You see, they are so angry about that allowance that my brother Kofi Adams' government has taken from them, that now, whether you are coming there with Campus Connect or Connect Campus, Yeji Alawa. And they were so angry and frustrated, they did what I am saying is violence, is assault, is unacceptable. But it had built up. So sometimes when you are also a leader in a house, even your own house, something, you know that there are certain things that if you do to your wife over a period of 10 years, one day she may react in a way unacceptable, but you are also part of it. So I am saying that the problem going on in South Africa...
It's been condoned.
I know. I was shocked to a very little extent, but not to a big extent, because I had seen... Look, I'm telling you, ANC boss, Zuma, good. It doesn't happen in South Africa, especially at an ANC giant's funeral. There's a certain undercurrent.
But within the ANC itself,
yes,
he had become a problem.
Yes.
He himself had become a problem within his party.
And one of the reasons is because he doesn't seem to be handling anything properly. And as for me, I'm also going within the context of a country where things don't seem to be going right. It should be addressed. Because we don't want this situation of the booing, which was a prerequisite, as happened in Ghana, where they started beating ministers with pure water. It will now lead to a certain disaffection and unhappiness that will be causing certain problems. Talking about what Egbert was talking about.
You encourage that ministers should be beaten with pure water?
And I've condemned that. I said that was violent. It's unacceptable. But there's a certain undercurrent. Why have you gone to take the alawa and come to sit there and tell them about Campus Connect?
Have you heard what is happening?
It doesn't connect.
After that beating those deputy ministers with water, Baumia was supposed to deliver a lecture at the whole Polytechnic, and we are told that this was an organized retaliation. He was prevented. He couldn't deliver that lecture.
So if
that
you continue, that
might get back. At Akati, but Baumia was not there.
Yes.
Okay.
He never arrived there.
No, never.
But indeed, there was some protest, some people holding placards. I'm told about 20 people.
Right.
I've only been wondering whether they had they are giving police prior notice.
Exactly. But my point is, let me just land on this. My point is that when it comes to this issue of suing somebody and so on, look, we all know that this is an issue of organized crime by some citizens. But this is not a state-sponsored crime. So it is very difficult to sue the state. What we have to do is that we have to go in tandem with the way that this thing will be solved. How?
If the expectation legitimate was that the state should have had a certain reaction, speedy, reaction to stop these things, and there's no evidence that the state did that,
and in fact,
could they not be
that is an area
answerable?
that I'm sure that Kofi would come in more to come and tell us a lot more about the government's reaction, especially concerning Hanatete and
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the state of South Africa.
No, the state of South Africa, our reaction towards them.
No, because I'm talking about South Africa and how there was a need, like Kuku suggested, deploying the police to go and stop and prevent.
We all know that the South African police and so they did not react well enough. What has happened? The condemnation. Look at, for example, even what Nana Akufo-Addo statement said. And that's why I said we have to do that to ask for a certain expectation, because what Egbefable is saying is a reaction from without, to affect the issue from within.
Okay.
Now, for example, the condemnation.
Sorry. Just hold on.
No.
You've been landing. Never landing. Just hold on.
Let me just land on this one. Let me land on this one. Yeah. I said that what Nana Akufo-Addo said was, one, he condemned the actions. And we have seen the same thing, as I said, from the Hanatete angle, from the ECOWAS angle, but I'm sure Kofi will expand on it. Then, of course, he went to give the condolences to all the Africans, and even the possibility of the Ghanaian who has been killed, because up to now, we are not too sure what exactly happened to that particular Ghanaian. Then he went on to give the exception that we know that not all South African people are wicked people, want to sort of deal with all foreigners in this way, because we know it's not a national policy. But then, most importantly, he gave and suggested an action plan. And what was this action plan?
Okay, don't worry. If it's
he said is to bring to book all these persons responsible for the waves of violence. So what Egbefable has been calling for is not really different from what a lot of people are calling for as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, Kofi, the president who chairs ECOWAS signed that statement by ECOWAS, welcoming what Jacob Zuma has said and the assurances that he gives. But yourself, from how you see the reaction of the South African government, do you think that they did enough, or they have done enough so far?
Thank you, Samson, and good morning to your viewers and also those who will be listening to us via radio. I say good morning to all of you. And it is interesting when you listen to Michael Kwe, but I will not spend time doing any responses to what he said. I'll leave that to the very good judgment of viewers and listeners, whether what he seeks to suggest is what we have to accept in this time and at this hour when we are talking about a very serious matter like this. Xenophobic attacks in South Africa is not a new thing, Samson. These have happened even in the past. In 2008, it was even more serious. So I am therefore surprised that anybody will sit here to try to justify this attack based on either the light system going off or any weakening of the currency. Because this is not the first time. South Africa is noted as a high crime country, especially in some of the areas. And that is why when you are going into that country, you are advised most of the time to be very careful where you go and at what time. So anybody, any serious analyst will therefore be surprised that we want to restrict the whole thing to just a Zuma problem. Yes, Zuma is having problems within his own party, leading to some breakaways and what have you. Thabo Mbeki also had the same problems. And that is how Thabo Mbeki even got removed and Zuma taking over the leadership of ANC at a certain point. So indeed, the ANC as a political party is going through some challenges. Its dominance, its control is being challenged after it has fought for freedom for the South African people. Subsequently, there has been some challenges within. Economic issues, yes. Job opportunities, yes. All these fits into general analysis. If you go to South Africa, you have situations where spousal attacks, husbands against wives, wives against husbands, boyfriends against girlfriends, even the security services against its own people. You remember not too long ago when some workers were demonstrating how the security sprayed bullets, live bullets on them, just gunning them down. This is the country we are talking about. Samson, to your question, I am not happy about the level of responses and the way and manner, even up to date, they are still going. When you have a situation such as that you feel the police is doing their best, but the military is good at stopping some of these things. You don't use only the police. You use a combination of police and military in dealing with that situation. So on that score, I am not very, very satisfied with the way and manner they responded. And the statement signed by His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama as chair of ECOWAS did not end with the statement by the assurances by President Zuma. They said he should do more than just the assurance.
They are looking for an action plan.
They are looking for action plan. They are looking for an action plan. Of course, we don't expect...
Because this is not the first time this is happening.
It's
and
happening.
It may not be the last time
it will happen
in South Africa.
And we must understand that South Africa is a sovereign state. So therefore, Ghana, Nigeria, or any other country cannot move in to say that they are going to take charge of security of what? South Africa. The best you can do is to say that you want to evacuate your nationals who are there, who are willing to be evacuated when the need arises.
But like Julius Malema said, they are not an island and they belong to the Committee of Nations. And that's why in groupings like ECOWAS and so on, they should be seen to be bringing a lot of pressure on them to do the right thing.
I think that so far, in 2008, it was more like we didn't do what we are doing today. That explains why possibly they can continue and then will attempt to do it to the point that a whole king will make the comments that I'm told were the precipitates that led to all these attacks. Now you are seeing some very serious responses from many countries. Some are even threatening a ban of South African products coming into their country or retaliating.
Nigerians have been very serious with that.
Yeah, they have threatened. Some countries have even stopped SASO from operating in their country. I think Namibia has done some very forceful responses. When you listen to individuals, they are talking about even the South African airline should be stopped from flying into various African countries. People are suggesting all kinds of things. There are some who are even saying that there should be a day's boycott on MTN. That if we all decide that we are not going to use MTN for a day or even two, it could have some serious impact on them. So
is that supposed to bring some pressure to bear on the authorities to act? Or I'm thinking that those who are at the front of doing all of these things, they don't understand all of these things. If you are not patronizing MTN, they cannot be bothered because some of them really may not be using phones. It will affect the giants, these businesses, and of course they would also bring some pressure to bear on their government that can you do something more to be able to protect all the other nationals within South Africa, so we don't suffer. What do you know about our plan? Mr. Kwesi Ahoy, the High Commissioner to South Africa, has given indications that there's actually supposed to be a meeting of African ambassadors again, together with the South African Authority to map out a strategy. But what is it that that Ghana is going to do? The evacuation plan, we are not too sure how it's going. About 40 Ghanaians have indicated clearly that they are stranded and they want to come home.
You see, there was a meeting of African ambassadors in South Africa with the authorities yesterday following President Zuma's statement, and the meeting was very clear. The leadership briefed the ambassadors on the developments, what they have done, that they have visited the areas, the troubled areas in Durban and some parts of Joburg, and I've assured that the security presence will continue, that 75 arrests have been made, and the African ambassadors who met these South African authorities made it very clear that, look, they should do much more to protect the other nationals in South Africa. The issue of compensation for lives that have been lost, properties that have been destroyed, and what have you, should equally be looked at. At the level of a country. Our High Commissioner there is in touch with the community leadership. You know, everywhere you go, you cannot contact every individual. You go to a particular area.
He speaks about Ghanaian associations.
Ghanaian association. Yeah. So you talk to the association leadership, who you will give the security tips, then they can also find a way of passing it on. And you give indication as to the nearest holding up area, because the South African authorities have created a holding up area that is well protected. So this information... But again,
I was saying that there are some Ghanaians who have expressed the desire to come home. There's one of them, for example, who spoke to Joy and said, this is what he said. He says that, we want to come home. She cried out, fearing that the murder, I'm reading from my Joy Online, she cried out, fearing that the murder of Emmanuel in Durban may not be the last of the senseless xenophobic attacks on Ghanaians and other Africans. And then she suggested that the cost of a plane ticket needed to make the return journey to Ghana is all that they are looking for. So should we be going straight for these people and picking them into Ghana?
Samson, you don't take that action when it is not necessary. You'll have to keep reviewing the situation. Of course, if you find yourself locked up in such situation, the first thing you want to consider is that I want to get out of it. So coming home is the first thing that will register in your mind. But for those who are having the briefs and knowing what it is that they should do at that time, first you want the security of the people first and foremost. So the first step is to make sure that wherever they are located, where the troubles are, get the people secured. Then you now start thinking about plans of what? Evacuation. Whether you want to evacuate them to a neighboring country for holding up until such times when peace and normalcy return. But the South African authority have assured all the African ambassadors there that they will do everything possible to make sure that it doesn't happen and that the security situation is contained. The number of police persons will increase on the street. A committee indeed have also been put in place to investigate how far the comments of the Zulu king influenced all these behavior. Was it indeed a hate speech, and so on and so forth? And the South Africans themselves are very embarrassed, no doubt about that. And Jacob Zuma himself, who is a Zulu, is even much more embarrassed than any other persons. And we should take this matter serious and let's deal with it once and for all. We must not approach it the way my brother Michael Kwe is trying to look at it. This is a serious matter. This is a matter that all African people, through our leadership, should take serious and then act on so it doesn't repeat itself. Like Kweku was saying earlier, South Africa is a country that benefited from the benevolence of many African states in helping them to fight against the apartheid regime. Some of them, indeed, school in Ghana here with Ghanaian scholarships. A lot of them have been supported by many other African countries, even at the expense of their states. They gave them such opportunity. They should be the last people to engage in acts such as this. This is condemnable. This is unacceptable. We must not allow. It should not happen.
Thank you.
Find a way of ring fencing their people.
Thank you, Kofi. Well, whilst we continue talking, my point though is that those who have clearly expressed that they want to come, and they have a reason for saying so, because these guys who are terrifying their lives have given a clear warning that they will continue to kill dozens more if they don't leave that country. Let's see how we are able to go by the assurances, and so this does not continue. This show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, welcome to the new world. And Sasso, fresh and powerful, also is brought to you by the sponsorship of Cowbell Coffee. I've got some messages here. Bonti Benjamin, in Achim Ebuakwa says, what's happening in South Africa undermines the growth in development of the continent and must be condemned by all and sundry. Africa must unite. Stephen in Tamale says, I admire Julius Malema for his bold stand on the ugly situation in his country. From his days as ANC youth leader till he was expelled for stating the truth in every situation, I can only liken him to our former president, John Rawlings. You don't give your name, you say the events going on in South Africa are a clear indication that Africans cannot accept one another under one roof. Oliver Bamba in Salega says the xenophobic attack can best be described as an act against humanity, and Nelson Mandela will be cursing the current leadership of South Africa as they sit and allow this gruesome murder to happen. Well, some of it had happened when he was alive,
sure.
Just that he wasn't president at the point.
Sure.
Raymond Osafo Jan Kwehutafo says, Black South Africans have shocked me. During the apartheid era, Black South Africans were all over the continent. I remember the son of Thabo Mbeki was a student at the University of Ghana when I was doing my first degree, and those people were treated like kings. Is that how they repay us? Brother Tick in Kumasi says, considering the fact that most of the ANC leadership and its armed wing lived in exile in neighboring countries during the struggle against apartheid, the events in South Africa are indeed sad. In 2008 and 2013, there were similar xenophobic attacks in South Africa without promptings from the Zulu king. A clear indication of deep underlying currents in South African society itself. After all, what type of jobs do the foreigners do, and how many of such jobs are there really? Unfortunately, the South African government is only raising weak protest because a focus on foreigners takes the spotlight of the ANC government's own deep-rooted incompetence, corruption, and terrible failure to redistribute economic wealth post-apartheid, which is the true root cause of these attacks. And Michael Okwe, Jr., is nodding to your text message.